Thanks for joining us today for the Seattle Design Festival event that we're collaborating with. If you haven't taken part in any of the other Design Festival events, they go on till August 23rd, and they're all exploring the theme of about time. So thanks so much for Design in Public for hosting this annual festival with such interesting themes. And we're going to spend a little time today giving you an overview of our services. I'm Carrie Basas. I'm the director of the Governor's Office of the Education Ombuds. And then we'll also just have you use your creativity and share some ideas with us about next steps in our own work. We'll explain a little bit more in a few minutes, but we are going through our strategic planning process, which has been community driven, even during this time when it's so hard to gather. And we're thinking about how do we implement this plan that we've come up with? What should the relationships and partnerships be like? So if you're near a computer, if you have a way to draw, even if you're not an artist, we don't care today. So if you have a pen, a pencil, or you like drawing on your computer through an app or your phone, get your craft supplies out. I wanted to introduce my colleagues who will be working with us in the breakout rooms and also in the presentation. I'm Carrie, as I mentioned. I'm joined by Sam, who's in Ellensburg, Sean, who is in Shoreline, and Jordanos, who is in West Seattle, and Stephanie, who is running our tech. So you have now met 5 out of 7 people in our office, and we're working statewide to help families and students. As we're talking today and collaborating, we were hoping that you could share in the chat and feel free to connect with one another, who you are and how you're connected to this theme of time to learn. We'd love to see your responses, and Sean will not be able to share each of the responses, but he'll give us some summaries of what things look like. So today we're going to spend about 15 or 20 minutes talking about who we are, what is an ombuds, what do we do? And then we're going to spend a little less than an hour in 2 breakout rooms to do design together. And then we'll spend 10 minutes doing a wrap up. And we'd love to make this as collaborative as possible. I wanted to acknowledge that we are all on different native lands. Most of our team is on the unceded territory and the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people. And they are people that are still here, and they continue to honor and bring light to their ancient heritage since time immemorial. There's an excellent curriculum from the Washington State Superintendent of Public Instruction about since time immemorial and the amazing contributions of Native people to our state and to our country and to the world. So if you haven't had a chance to look into where you are and which Indigenous people and tribal nations have really formed this land and the social change that's part of it, it's a great time to look into that. I'm going to switch over to Sam right now from our office, who's going to give an overview of what we do. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to address what we can. But again, we're going to spend most of our time today working with you in smaller breakout rooms.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm Sam Blazine. I'm a regional senior education ombuds here in Ellensburg on the east side of the mountains. And if you could see there on the slide, you see our mission. We were envisioned by the legislatures in 2006. And the idea was that there would be an agency that would be outside of the K-12 system that would work with families and the K-12 system to inspire and connect that relationship and family engagement. We're very unique in the state. We work with families, we work with schools, we work with communities. Because we're not part of the actual educational system, we have the ability to be impartial and to be objective and to be that voice of the communities that we hear and the issues that we try to help. Carrie, can you forward it to the next one? Thank you. We have 3 main functions in our office. As Carrie mentioned, there are 7 of us. We cover the entire state. We work with families. We work with solving problems We have three different ways in which we do that. One is we provide a lot of information and referral through the intake process. When the situation warrants a little bit more time and families are then have the opportunity to consult with a senior education ombuds in which we can provide some informal mediation. And either way, what we always leave the family with some ability to do some self-advocacy. We kind of walk and guide them along. So that's one of our functions. Another one is we do training and outreach across the state. We have a lot of networking and collaboration with different agencies and organizations in various levels. And we're also very involved with policy work. We're involved with the Opportunity Gap Committee with the state. We have a seat in the Special Education Advisory Council, Family Engagement, and several other entities at the state level where we are able to be that liaison and communication between what we're hearing from communities, and so that we can be that voice during those that venue. And some of the examples of the work, this particular one is what I am doing on the East and Central side. I came on to OYO nearly 8 years ago, was the first regional ombuds for the state, simply because we do have different sides of the state. We have different issues, different diversity, different just approaches. So on this side, I have worked diligently with pulling communities and school together. These are just some examples of things that happen on a regular basis. I do bi-monthly workshops in question and answers with Familias Unidas, which is a pretty large migrant group in the Yakima area. I don't know if you're familiar with the Yakima area. And so a couple of times a month, I'll do a session where we just talk about what are your questions, what are your concerns, and we can connect the families to resources and services that may need and give them the information that they need so their children can be successful. We have collaborative meetings with the ESD is a district. We're broken down to several ESDs that represent different school districts, and the 105 is in my area. And so I work very closely with them. The Youth at Risk is an advocate group that meets monthly to talk about youth that are at risk, youth that are outside of school, who needs supports that are a little bit more intensive. So there are several things that we do here on the East and Central side. And what we're hoping today as we break out in our sessions, just to kind of pick your brains so we can expand this. We can always expand, and we know there's a lot more areas that we need to cover, and this is why we're kind of seeking out your help and have this conversation today. So thank you.
And hi guys, my name is Sean Haynes, and I am the Community Outreach Specialist here in the Office of the Education Ombuds. And I thought it would be good to tell you guys about one of the relationships we developed sort of from the beginning to end, so you can get an idea of how these relationships develop and mature. But before we do that, I just want to do a couple of shout outs to some of the people in the chat, Rachel Nemhauser and Patty Gonzalez from the King County. I get your emails all the time, and I think you guys have helped me out a lot on our Facebook content. We also have Rebecca Biak from the Tribal Foster Parent from the La Conner School District, and Sarah from Snoqualmie Valley Parent and Tahoma teacher. Thank you guys for joining us. So about a year ago, we reached out to the Congolese Integration Network. We actually ran into one of the members, Providence, at a refugee rally, and so we heard about their issues, and we introduced ourselves, and we talked a little, and we actually got invited to come and share about our office at the Congolese Integration Network. And once we shared, we sort of found some mutual areas of work, some issues that we're having, and some resources that we had to be able to help. So we got invited to do some workshops, some clinics. So we were sharing information about the school district, sharing information about how our office works, and then listening to parents about what issues they were having specifically, so we can help them on a case-by-case basis. And once we started developing that trust and relationship, then we actually started getting calls to our office about more issues that they were having. And so that started covering the outreach that we do, the way that we meet them, and we hear them out about their issues. And once we develop that trust, we start getting calls from them about more issues that they might be having, or more ideas they might be having, or questions. And so we started doing casework with that. And then once we got the relationship going, we actually started getting feedback from them on our strategic planning. So that's also kind of includes some of the policy work that we do, all which were mentioned by Sam a little bit earlier. So that's kind of how that relationship was developed. Now, not all relationships are equal or developed the same way, but I just figured it might be good to have a little example of how it is that we work. For example, they were having a lot of issues like enrolling into school and understanding the school system and dealing with maybe some bullying issues or some disciplinary issues from the culture shock. And we helped with all of those. And now we have a mature relationship and trust relationship with them, where we come and share with families. Well, during COVID, we don't really come that much, but we do have a working relationship with them, and we do get their input. We did get their input on this strategic plan that now we're trying to find ways to execute. So with that, I hope that's helpful as an example, and I'll pass it back to Carrie.
So you may know from the news, if you've been following it, that schools are not the easiest places right now. And that we have an interesting system in Washington where we have a separately elected superintendent of public instruction, as well as the governor who is elected. And so it's really been coordination between two state agencies and trying to figure out their respective roles. And one reason why we're under the governor's office is to have that independence and to be able to take the concerns that we're hearing about through our informal conflict resolution, think about the trends and needs that are there, as well as the strengths of communities to guide collaboration and presentations, trainings, just informal conversations and listening sessions, and then take those stories and experiences to the state level on policy committees, as Sam was sharing how those parts go together. We were up for a new strategic plan. Our 3-year plan was expiring in August. And we started this process with a central design question. In the beginning, we could go to community groups and educator groups and ask them how we could better use our resources for racial justice. And then COVID hit. And then the other pandemic of being reminded, although a reminder is not the same for people who are living with it all the time, of the effects of anti-Blackness and racism, and then how that was exacerbated by COVID, all came together. So we were both trying to think about this design question of how do we move forward and really get that co-design piece, as well as how can we be responsive with limited resources. We know the state will make budget cuts, and we are thinking about our roots. Our legislative mission and founding by legislators of color, largely, and Native legislators, was to focus on reducing opportunity gaps. So to really look at educational equity and justice issues. And we've seen so many communities affected by COVID. But as we were working with community groups, these were areas of concern that came out, and we realized that students and families don't exist in silos. So we are here under our new strategic plan to provide support to every student, family, and teacher who calls us with a question about Washington's K-12 public system. But when we're thinking about our informal conflict resolution focus, as well as our policy focus, we have come to really wanting to live into racial justice and to fight ableism and racism. And so here are the communities that we are focusing on moving forward. And part of our design with you today will be what's the next step in actually doing this. So just to run through this list for access, we're looking at students who are out of school, including students who receive partial days, and people of color, Black or Indigenous, students and families who are experiencing homelessness, in kinship or foster care, involved with the juvenile justice or juvenile rehabilitation systems, immigrant, refugee, asylee, or migrant, or students or families whose primary language or languages is not English, and students who are receiving wraparound with intensive services or children's long-term inpatient program supports. And if you're outside of education, which is really exciting, because we often play with folks in education, and so Design in Public gives us a chance through this to get some fresh ideas. You're like, what is that at the bottom? We're really talking about students who have a team of support because of their needs, and with CLIP talking about mental health services. So students who might have the most social, emotional needs and resources that need to be pulled together. So that's how we're prioritizing. I wanted to go back to what it means to be anti-racist and anti-ableist. And we've already started conversations in the nation, the state, of how maybe anti-racist isn't enough, that maybe we need to name anti-Blackness. We're talking about using Dr. Kendi's definition, and there are many out there, that to be anti-racist is to deracialize behavior. And it means that we don't have expectations, and especially low expectations, of students, families, or educators based on their race. And it's also an active way of participating. It's not just philosophical. To be anti-racist, you have to take steps. So it's very much different in terms of the role of white people and others who hold power than, you know, saying that they're good progressive folks, or that they really value everyone. So it is working to dismantle racism. And ableism isn't something that we often talk about, but I have to say that over half the calls that we get are about students with disabilities, and they will continue to be. I mean, we'll just see students with disabilities appearing in different communities as we have over time, like immigrant and refugee communities, English learners, foster and homeless, and students out of school. So ableism is really that oppression or prejudice or stereotyping or discrimination against disabled people on the basis of actual or presumed disability, and the belief that people are superior or inferior, have a better quality of life, or have lives more valuable or worth living on the basis of that perceived or actual disability. And that's from activist Lydia Brown, who is a person of color who's a disability rights activist. And ableism and racism feed one another. When we think about a deficit-based lens, we think about who's been institutionalized, labeled as mentally ill or imprisoned, and those experiences are important to understand and to not just lump together without reflection, but they do feed one another. So we really want to think about that and our skills as a team in addressing that. I'm going to pass it over to Jordanos, because we're going to move into some breakout rooms soon, and we hope technology will abide. But Jordanos is going to talk a little bit about what our question is for today.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to every single one of you who has taken time out of your day to be here with us. So as Carrie said, in just a bit here, we're going to break out into two rooms, excuse me. And we're going to answer this one question that really has two parts. So definitely answer both. But I do want to highlight the importance of a piece of this question. So the question today, I'll read it out loud. It's how and where should OEO show up statewide to develop trusting, ongoing relationships that center this anti-ableist and anti-racist work. And what I wanted to highlight was that how. That how is really crucial. Anyone can tell you about, where to go. They can tell you about an event date and where to show up. They can send you a Zoom link. But what's really critical, so that is important, definitely answer the where. But what's also critical for us to hear in our office is how folks show up and how folks continue to show up. So that's our question for today. We're going to break out into two rooms and go through the design activity that answers this question, and then we'll reconnect back together and share out.
So if you're new to Zoom, although that's not many of us now since we're living online, please accept the invitation to go to the breakout room, and you can start reflecting on this design question, and you'll get the Google Doc there too. If you already have access to the Google Doc from the chat, go in please and find your name. And we're going to try to keep everybody in their own lane today so that we're not typing over one another. See how well we do. This is Carrie. It looks like most of us are back or we're coming back. And I wanted to thank you all for hanging in there with us during this time. We had a good discussion in our breakout room, and there's never enough time. And so I was wondering if we had a bit of a synthesis in our breakout room, but if Jordanos and Sam could share some of the themes, and then we would invite you all to share too if you want to, and then we'll just wrap up with some gratitude and requests for feedback.
All right. Hi, everybody. We had really good discussions in our group. I think a couple of the themes that I heard, and I can have some folks here jump in a little bit if I miss something, but there was a lot of talk about relationships, how it's important to have relationships and really understand the classrooms, that universal design that we've talked about for so long in our state, and we're so far away from achieving it. So to reduce the gaps, the effectiveness of our work, and how much sometimes our limitations, because we're more neutral and more impartially driven, and that we're changing a little bit of that and being more focused in areas that need more work. So that was a pretty deep discussion that we had. The fact that OEO, has and is limited in authority. And so all of these discussions is really good. And how can we really break those barriers so we can be more effective in working with the communities? We talked about the outreach in understanding communities, understanding what their strengths and weaknesses are. So those are some of the main themes that came up in our conversation. Which was inclusion, equity, understanding, relationship, and language. Those are the big ones. So, especially with multilingual families, students of families that don't speak well English, how we need to extend that relationship and conversation and being proactive with them.
And so we shared a lot about the relationships too, and the where you show up. Folks talked about when you're doing that outreach, where are folks actually, where are they convening, where are they most in community, and actually, meeting folks where they're at in that way. We also talked about how we see over and over and over again about how people's perceptions impact how they treat situations. And because of how, particularly, we were talking about anti-Blackness and talking about how a lot of times the actual concern, the actual issue doesn't even get dealt with because it's sort of like this whole backtracking thing, and folks are dealing with their discomfort with difference, and who suffers the student and the family. They carry that burden. So we talked a lot about seeing like people as a whole, seeing students as people who, they're someone's child, they belong to a community, they have a history, they've got a culture, and stop forcing the issues to conform to the structure that we all know. Actually work from like the student and the family, and then you work your way out from there, and keeping students and families at the center.
This is Carrie. We talked a little bit and naming it in different ways about experiencing that discomfort rather than, if someone doesn't have that experience, whether it's with linguistically diverse families or how to talk about race, like getting up to speed and not relying on others to make that comfort for you or judging them based on that. We talked about in the context of positive identity of various kinds. So and that we have to act versus reflecting. Like now is a great time to reflect, and in part we had this webinar so we could think about how we can act as 7 people. We got ideas from our first session, but we have to do something regardless of our role. Every day we do something, and lack of action, inaction, is action too. And so we appreciate all these relationships we have with folks, and we want to know we want to do better in showing up. It's an ongoing thing for each of us, right, in different ways. So we have like about 5 minutes if anybody wanted to share something that we've left out or wanted to deepen. And how can we be, Tafra had a question, how can we be more involved after this meeting? I put my contact information in our small group chat, but we'd love to have discussions. So we have team meetings twice a week. We often, and there's 7 of us, we're not intimidating. We often have people come that want to talk about the work. We're very friendly, as you can see. We weren't hiding the other 2 people from you. So we have people come who want to talk about their work. And, you know, I've had parents or others just email me and say, I'm sick of this. You know, I'm seeing it for somebody else in our school. How do I do something about this? Or what does advocacy look like? And so we welcome those conversations too. And we keep it really informal. I mean, the bureaucratic state agency answer is we have an email list. We have a Facebook page. You know, there are ways to keep up with the news that we have. But if you want to share something too, we can make space for that. So feel free to reach out directly too. Somebody will respond. And we invite you to invite us where you are as well. Whether it's a parent group or, oh gosh, we've been invited to civic clubs, other things, a childcare center to share in some way. So I see that people are dropping their emails in chat from our team, and I'll put our general one in there too. So I'll go, and then we, as Stephanie pointed out, Labor of Love, our website is in 10 languages, and we really focused on getting those professionally translated rather than giving you the Google Translate experience, which is sometimes laughable. My daughter's from Ukraine, and I realized I wrote to her nurse, instead of signing warmly, it was with heat, which fortunately she forgave me for. But you know, you don't really want to sign emails to people you don't know with heat. At least it wasn't like in hotness or something. But
may I say something?
yeah,
Sure.
Okay. I was just, now I forgot what I was going to say, but the reason I chose kindergarten is because this is something, as far as really getting to this achievement gap, you know, like right this kindergarten thing is, and this preschool thing, those 0 to 5 and that developmental period, that's a crucial time if we could wrap around those children from the beginning and really help the parent understand. I work with the parent. This is what we need to know for first grade, or this is what we need to know for kindergarten. So they are empowered with the knowledge and I go with them and we give them the books and all the materials, sit down at the table and we go through it, and they see it's fun. They watch me read to the baby, and we can read a story, or what we can do, or how do we go for a walk, or we meet at McDonald's, or whatever it takes. So that parent becomes, and we work together, because if they had a difficult experience, then here we are in kindergarten, going from mama to kindergarten teacher. If we can catch those babies right then and there, and they're ready for first grade, that's the thing. Every single kindergartner is ready for first grade. I won't send you to first grade if you're not ready. And mama's going to know. Long time we've been working, and this is what we got to do. So then that's going to stop when you get to first grade. No matter what teacher you have, you'll be able to do the work. And then I would strategically send it to the teacher I knew, if I needed, you know, that child needed a little extra, that they would do that. It's got to be strategic, and if we can start with those babies, I mean, and I'm not leaving the others out, because I got ideas for them too that we can do, but I'm saying if we can start right there, that nobody's going to first grade not ready. Whatever we need to get that baby ready, that can change that every year. That group goes on. That next group goes on. That next group goes on. Because once you've got those foundational skills and you like learning, school becomes a different place for everybody.
I also wanted to say real quick on, you know, in the whole spirit of providing feedback, I shared this with a small group earlier, and also want to share this with our larger group too, that if things come up that you can think of after today, please don't hesitate to reach out, whether you're calling our free line or emailing one of us, just however you get that information to us. I hope that you won't hesitate and that you will as ideas pop up. And as we're, continue on our work, whether it's, a month from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, I just don't want that feedback to ever stop coming. It's not about hurt feelings. It's about actually wanting to do better. So please do give that to us.
Mm-hmm. And I link, I don't know if your intention, Jordanos, was to share the Survey Monkey, but I linked the link on the chat for everyone. Okay.
Yes, if you could fill that out, we will read it. So please fill that out and give us some feedback there as well. And then, I think that is it. Carrie, any wrap-up comments?
And I think there are such great ideas here, and we do want to keep the conversation going. So, thinking about how do we leverage the library and informal learning spaces, providing more space and actually co-hosting as well in different communities, strengthening our relationship with tribal nations, and really seeing families and students for who they are. So we really appreciate that you joined us, and we sincerely mean reach out to us at any time, because we have certain relationships like we all do, but we need new relationships, and we also need feedback on the relationships that we have.